Please welcome on stage our two speakers. Congratulations. Come on down. Dan and Jonathan, thank you.
All right. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dan Brahmy. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO at Cyabra. I just want to say we are thrilled to be here. I want to say thank you for our great partners, Meltwater, for this opportunity to be on stage and talk about what we're about to talk about. I'm also very lucky to be sharing the stage with Jonathan from Orchestra. If you want to give a quick introduction of yourself as well.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jonathan Rosen. I'm the CEO of Orchestra. We're a strategic communications company working on some of those complex issues around the country. I know it's the afternoon session and people are a little tired and spread out, but Dan has some incredible research he's going to share with you, and we're excited to talk about it. I came because I thought, given that Gwyneth was here this morning, we might get Goop Kitchen passes, but so far that hasn't worked out. But I live in hope. But thank you all for being here, and look forward to having a great discussion with all of you.
Yeah, definitely disinformation. That's what I know. Quick note about the title, because we've been asking some questions about this. So for those of you who don't know, JARVIS is the little voice, the calm voice that whispers in Iron Man's ear. I'm a Marvel geek, I get it, that's fine. But every time he encounters a weird situation, it's aggressive, it's weird, he has to fire missiles, he doesn't just jump into it. He doesn't respond, he doesn't react. First, he acknowledges the situation, he understands, and only then he jumps into this. And so the whole conversation, this whole analogy of what JARVIS does on behalf of Iron Man is the framework for the next 25 minutes that we have together. Before we go any further, by the way, let me tell you what the session is not going to be about. Yes, we will talk about detection, monitoring, AI, deepfake, bots, AI, deepfake, AI. Sure, we're going to be talking about this. I get it. I will tell you this. I want to talk about the business problem. We felt like, Jonathan and I felt like if we just talked about these keywords and we made it like the title of the session, we were missing the problem. And the problem is very clear. Your team sees a spike, right? The dashboard turns red, the board starts making phone calls, we need an answer within 45 minutes, we don't understand what's going on, should we not react? There's a big problem with this. And so this is not going to be a tech lecture. It's not, I promise you. It's only going to be a quick session about decision quality. What should we respond to, and how do we know what should we rely upon, whether it's trusted and authentic? This is the main picture that we have. I'll give you the keynote if you want.
Oh, amazing. Thank you.
All right, yeah.
And so this is happening in a new landscape that all of you here who are communicators are living with every day. You know, we talk about how communicators are facing a landscape defined by 3 real variables right now. People, your audiences are everywhere, consuming news from everything, all the time. Pace, the speed at which news cycles speed up, only fueled by AI, which we're going to get into later, is unprecedented, requiring response at a level not usually seen in companies so far. And power. What we mean by that is that threats to brands and companies are really democratized. In a world where any tweet, any image, any video can quickly go viral, those 3 things together are defining how communication's working. You know, we heard this morning about building authentic connections and how, you know, Goop has pivoted their business. And that's a lot of the business we're in as communicators. That goal has gotten a lot harder in a world defined by, you know, the huge changes across these 3 areas. The landscape is totally fragmented. Your audience isn't seeing one version of reality. They're seeing dozens or hundreds of versions of reality across 10 different platforms in real time. So what do you do about it? Wait. OK, that worked. This is the part I was most worried about, was if this button would do the thing. So we're doing well here. In that world, as communicators, and a thing we really rely on Cyabra as a partner for, is how you tell the difference between signal and noise. Because as communicators and as brands, we are drowning in noise. So let's put this in perspective. Every day, 720,000 new hours of video content are uploaded across the main social platforms. You could spend 85 years of your life just watching the clips that were uploaded to YouTube today. 34 million clips are uploaded individually across these platforms. And so we are drowning in noise. You add to that the power of AI to create even more content, even faster, it becomes just a tidal wave that's making it really, really hard for our clients and for, I'm sure, many of you to understand what's really happening out there. And in a world with too much noise, audiences and brands are trying to figure out, well, what's the signal? What's real here? What really matters? How do we make sense of the chaos? So on the one hand, we're in this sea of noise, just an overwhelming sea of just too much information. In the time you're all sitting here, if you're blissfully not checking your phones, by the time you leave, you will have a million notices and things just to catch up on. That's the sort of sea that we're all in. And we're in this sea of noise also at a time of totally declining trust. We're in a world where people have fewer and fewer interactions with each other, have fewer and fewer relationships with trusted brands. And so we have the largest explosion of content in history, the deepest trust crisis in our lifetimes, and a pace that really feels like it's out of control. What does that do? It creates a dynamic where even very small pieces of disinformation, if they fit a frame that works, can explode, get rapidly repeated, get amplified, and get legitimized. That's the world I know all of us are contending with. Dan has been our partner in talking how this works, and he's going to tell you how this actually happens under the surface.
Thank you. OK. This looks like an anti-headache advertising. I don't know why, but it's looking pretty good. So actually, it's a cycle. All right? It is a cycle. It has 4 stages to it. Let me walk you through it just so you understand. It actually starts, and most people wouldn't think of that, but it starts with a real conversation, a real narrative. You know, a company wants to change its logo. There was an ousting of an executive member, a campaign launches, and then you have real people that are actually jumping into the opportunity of engaging because it's triggering, it's interesting, right? So far, it's actually an emerging narrative that sparks from the very people that are sitting in this room right now, real people. In the old world, then you would have the bots, the inauthentic profiles that are just like talking to each other in a little void, and then they're like in this weird echo chamber between themselves. That used to work a couple years ago. Today, it's actually very sophisticated, and what we see is fundamentally different. Our data shows that it's not the old world of one amplifying the other. They don't. What they do is they embed themselves within those real conversations, right? Oh, they closed a new bank? Interesting. Why don't we start pushing something into that? And so once that starts playing out, and you sort of embed and merge yourself into the real narratives and the real conversations, the third point is even more interesting. Because if you think from a media perspective, right, that's when the cycle starts accelerating. One traditional media outlet, journalist or reporter, starts looking at it and say, hold on a second. That virality is my signal. And that signal is my story. And then it becomes 1 media pickup, 2 media pickups, 10. And it usually happens so freaking fast. Are we allowed to curse? I don't know if we're allowed to curse, actually. Anyway, I'm French, it's OK. And so, but actually, once you go through that, then the new reality becomes the new cycle, right? It emerges as the new reality becoming it's an endless circle. So let me just wrap this up, because it's interesting. The most important sentence, if you guys want to take it away, is that we shouldn't be really focusing on what the malicious and the fake and the inauthentic are saying. You shouldn't. What you should be focusing on is whether the malicious and the inauthentic, while it might be the minority, actually has the ability to influence the majority of the signal. That's when the reality changes for these brands and for the other institutions that we look at together. I'd like to actually give a real case study. Why don't we go into something that we might have all heard of, yeah? 2025, August, Cracker Barrel. It's a real story, okay? They wanted to change their logo. They went from, and they went from like this, like the legacy traditional logo that has been with them for years into this new, modernized, super techy. It was great. It looked great from the outside, but real people, right?
It's no goop kitchen.
You know, and I can't judge. And then, but what actually happened is that the story wasn't about the bots. It wasn't about the deep fakes. It wasn't about like the manipulated narratives. It started with us looking at it and saying, something's off. We're not happy about that. When you go into this, that's when it becomes interesting. Let me take you back to what we talked about, right? The anti-headache framework that we spoke of. Let's apply this for Cracker Barrel. Nobody manufactured the noise from the ground up. Like we said, there was a new narrative from real people, and they jumped into it. They simply saw the signal for themselves. They were like, wow, this is such a good opportunity. I mean, there's a storm. There's a shitstorm. We need to go in. This is my cue to jump into this. So these very well-coordinated bot actors and inauthentic actors, they created 3 narratives, 3 tracks, completely different one from another. First one, they loved going into the tradition versus the modern. Oh, trust me. That was so heavy, so complicated, you know, erasing the heritage. It's such a big company. Why would you erode the trust that we've built over the last 50 years together? Why would you do that? Second narrative, which was also pretty hurtful. Well, if you're changing your brand and you're changing the way that you communicate, maybe there's a financial doom behind it. Maybe you guys need money. Maybe you got, well, hold on. You know what? Maybe we should just delete the app, never walk into the restaurants again. This is over. Company's over. There's no restaurants, there's no food, nobody's serving anything. Third narrative. They actually created a villain, the CEO. They went after the CEO and they put the villain on the spot and said, you are responsible for this. We don't like this. We don't believe in you anymore. By the way, if you think that these are interesting narratives, what about the volume? So these 3 tracks of narratives pushed by highly manipulated and well-orchestrated inauthentic profiles, they reached 4.5 million people within a day and a half. Thousands of engagements and posts just running around wildly. What happens after that? Media looks at it, says, oh my God, what is going on? Goes from one media outlet to the second, to 5, to 10, like we said. Becomes a huge story. And from the moment that the media and the mainstream media picks it up, becomes a new reality. And following it was, I think, August 21st or 22nd, you see a drop in the stock value. $100 million was wiped out. I'm not saying that the bots are the one orchestrating the entire market, or that the deepfakes are the reason why everything happens. No, I get it. I mean, you know, markets are complicated, especially the public markets one. But what I am saying is that they were so sophistically well embedded and inserted into these real conversations that they were able to distort the reality that we all lived in. What happens a week later? They went back to the old logo.
And I think one thing that's interesting about this case study, beyond the really incredible research Cyabra did, is the bots started the show. Yeah. But once you have bots that seem pretty real, that impacts how real people start to interact with the bots. You know, social influence works 2 ways, right? So there can be authentic social influencers moving us to have affinity for a brand, moving us to be inflamed about an issue, moving us to make a consumer choice. Inauthentic social influencer that looks pretty real can have the same effect. So you start with millions of inauthentic posts. It doesn't end there. That actually shapes then the real world perception of people who are highly susceptible to online influence, which is a large section of the consumer population. So these things are kind of not binary, and I think one of the things that D'Angelo educated me and our team about is as the bot traffic has gotten more sophisticated, as they interact more with real conversations, they're not just fake bots talking to fake bots. They're fake bots talking to real people, but then engaging and pulling in new real people into the conversation, really magnifying the risk that you as a communicator need to deal with.
Because it's intriguing. It's triggering people. It's good enough. It's believable enough for people to get drawn into this. Actually, we call this the blind spot. And let me be clear, by the way. I mean, we're here on this stage thanks to our beloved partners, Meltwater. And so obviously, the brands that work with Meltwater, they all need a solution that is able to listen, that is able to understand, that is able to deep dive into the volume, the sentiment, the pickup, the media, everything. It will never go away. Not now, not in a decade from now. That has never been the point. The only point that we're trying to make is that these solutions that are in place, whether it is Meltwater or any other company, although we're not advertising any other company, I know that, but there's a layer of questions that these solutions have not been engineered to answer in the first place. Who's amplifying it? Who's trying behind the scenes to orchestrate that picture that we're all seeing right now? Right? They don't tell you who's trying to manipulate from an authentic versus trusted picture. And so that's what we said earlier, and that's kind of repetitive, but it's a very important point for us to put, which is it's never about the 5 bots or the 50,000 bots. It's never about that. Remember, it's always about whether the minority has been able to push a content that is good enough and believable enough so that the majority falls into this. We are the majority. This is us. Can I show you something? Actually, this is just a really quick clip. I think it'll make sense if you watch it.
I cannot believe what this did to my teeth. It is absolutely unacceptable. Do not buy Bright Bite. Boycott this trash.
Great ending for the video, of course. That person does not exist, as a matter of fact. Let me just go here once again. That person does not exist. Bright Bite does not exist. Dental Quinn, was it Dental Quinn? Dental Quinn, sorry, does not exist, and so therefore, of course, the engagement wouldn't exist in the first place. But here's the interesting part. If you look in the bottom right corner, would it be for you? It says VO. Most people wouldn't have seen it. I can promise you that you as professionals may have seen that it's not the typical social media engagement, it's not the typical layout. But how about the other 99% they're just not knowledgeable as you guys are? They don't know what's the difference between A feed and B feed, between A streaming and B live streaming, but they see that. And sometimes, without knowing, they'll engage with Bright Bite. What if it was at high scale? What if it was really well orchestrated?
How long did it take you to make that video?
What?
How long did it take you to make that video?
Took me roughly 5 minutes, 1 prompt, and it was at midnight. So what if you had 100 different variations, 50 people doing it, and a budget of $1 million? That would be fun to see how your competitive landscape is looking at this, right? But that's the picture that we're looking at. This is why we called it the JARVIS moment, going back to the very beginning of this, which is kind of what we are altering to, right? The ability to get your whisper in your ear that's telling you, before you jump in, before you react, before you respond to something, let me tell you. Let me tell you what's actually happening. Let me tell you who's trying to pull the strings and really influence other people's opinion. If you look at the ABC, it's called the actor behavior and content. The actor was fake. We can literally just call it fake because it took me 5 minutes. So the actor was fake. The behavioral patterns were completely engineered from the ground up. You can look at the engagement, the way that we could have just pushed it, right? And then the content. It's actually pretty good. Like most of you may have been fooled while we were watching the video. So the content, again, doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be believable and good enough for you and me to get baited into this. And when you think about the scale that can be applied to that, when you use the product, when you use a type of solution like ours, it never starts, for example, it never starts with one single platform. A storm operates multi-layer across different platforms. Maybe we're telling you, oh, you know what? It's actually 5% fake or 20% fake. But what matters is to understand the benchmarking. Maybe in your industry, the benchmark is 12% in authenticity at any given point in time. So 38 would definitely trigger something. Oh, and by the way, this was only one video that was engineered from the ground up, but we found 3 of them that were propagated by these 7 impersonating accounts of the chairwoman, the CEO, the chief marketing officer, you name it. How about that? How about this whole picture now? So what we're trying to say is that Jonathan and I want to make sure that brands don't react when they panic. This is the most important piece here. They shouldn't react when they panic, and it's not necessarily just about the speed anymore. It's about the clarity of decision quality, right? And so sometimes when these brands are reacting to the loudest noise, they might actually not only miss the cue, but they also might miss the right voices, the real people that are saying something. So this is very important to create that distinction. And maybe I should give you the mic for, well, you're already mic'd up. What am I giving you? I'm just giving you this.
Give me the magic button.
Just the button, yeah. Jonathan will walk you through the playbook.
All right. I thought he was going to make a video of me for this presentation. A little disappointed. So we're in this world, super low trust, super high political polarization, where issues that are seemingly not political are immediately coded and get into the division in this country. A logo, a pair of sneakers, a pair of jeans, it can become a lightning rod. Through our work together, I've been terrified to see that this trend is really only accelerating, and that the rise of agentic AI is making sort of the human character of how bots are interacting really, really hard for even the most skilled professionals to understand. And it's also taking a world where the line between coordinated attacks and then what becomes organic is really blurring. So we need a new level of vigilance. That's a given. Because once a narrative looks real, we have a lot of evidence to suggest the world's going to treat it as real. So how do we operate in this world? How many people in this room are professional communicators? All right. How many of you have dealt with bot attacks before? All right, so hopefully this will resonate. If not, you can make a deepfake video of me and change what I say. So we have a framework at Orchestra we talk about as measure, monitor, and manage. So first, measure. Going back to our overall thematic, the world is drowning in noise. It's our job to help our clients understand signal. 2 of the most interesting crises, I think, recent are when companies actually knew more than the media about the narrative and chose not to react. So many of you remember prior to the pandemic, Nike did their hero video campaign with Colin Kaepernick at the point that he had left the San Francisco 49ers. And media and social was exploding. The bot traffic was off the charts, political polarization, racial polarization, sort of all the issues that divide people, and it can become really, really toxic online. But what was really interesting here is that social noise didn't equal real life. The communicators at Nike had the courage of their convictions because they had first-party data that they were watching, that while media was hyperventilating, while people were saying on the Today Show, and all the chyrons were people burning their sneakers. Does anyone remember the morning people were burning their sneakers on TV? Is anyone old enough to remember that? All right. There are a few people, I thank you. The stock dip that day. Remember Jim Cramer on CNBC? Everyone was hair on fire. The shoe became a bestseller, and it was actually a huge part of Nike's cultural return. And we all remember our friend Sid, earlier this year with American Eagle, when they released their jeans campaign. I think for me, the past 6 months, that was probably the biggest sort of consumer social-focused campaign, maybe since Cracker Barrel. And through Cyabra, saw just enormous amount of bot traffic, interacting with that, again, got into sort of the political coding of every issue in this country, and really moved it. American Eagle did a really interesting thing. Nothing. They literally didn't say a word. They wouldn't get baited. They stuck to their campaign, and they had the last laugh. A few weeks later, they announced record-breaking sales. The stock skyrocketed. They flipped the narrative with evidence, with results, and shut it down. They showed and didn't tell. That takes a lot of guts and a lot of courage. And we've all been in situations where we have board members or executive team leaders who are like, we have to react to this thing right now. And so understanding the long game, the business objective, and how you're going to get there. So interesting example of social noise doesn't always equal real life. Sometimes it does. But let's start from a place of what's the actual signal? So within that, we need to have the ability to monitor. One thing I'm always amazed by is companies with modern communications functions today that do not have a communications research function. What I mean by that is always-on opposition research that can look at threat actors and look at where these narratives are coming from, as well as bring first-party data to these situations. American Eagle had data. They knew what was happening in their stores. That informed their comms strategy. Comms was downstream of a business decision, not a tactic driving the entire conversation. One thing that's super important in a world of a lot of inauthentic conversation is being able to credibly expose it quickly. For us, through our partnership with Cyabra, we're able to bring to our clients real-time intelligence to actually show them that this activity is inauthentic. That then begs the question, why? So how do we get into who's motivated to jump into this conversation? Is it political expediency? Is it a commercial opponent? Is it shareholder activism? I grew up in political campaigns and rapid response and in crisis, and research was the key to how you won the day. We're really big believers that you need that research capability to understand where things are coming from. With tech partners like Cyabra, with other partners, we're able to look at an attacker's account, cross-reference it, find that the TikTok account trashing one brand, simultaneously boosting a competitor, and where it's coming from. Either way, one core thing we believe, and really want to take one thing away from this conversation, is really building a modern research function that moves at the speed of a political campaign, that is digital first and tied to your first-party data. That moves you from, instead of defending yourself, to being able to provide first-party information of both impact and what's really happening, and motivations, which is a real impactful way of changing the narrative. Third, is manage. We're in a whole new world. I'm older than a lot of you, but I remember when I started in this business, everything was about, the dailies, getting the early edition. Has anyone here also done the going to the Hudson News at Penn Station at 2 in the morning to get the early New York Post in the 1990s? All right, one person, 2 people. That was the best. That was the golden era of PR. And that was all that mattered, how you manage that. Because if you could have the cover of the Post, manage that, that shaped the morning shows, that shaped the day. We are 30 years and 10 generations of media away from that world. But too often, comms still runs as a one-sport event. Comms in too many companies is a marathon. You're doing one thing. You're running down the track. Comms isn't a marathon anymore. It's a decathlon. Comms is at the center. You have to be able to move across every part of your company. I'm sure many of you subscribe to Axios Communicators. They had a recent study over how far up the C-suite the CCO job is moving. That more and more CCOs report directly to the CEO, have more than one title. And that's really key because today, a comms problem isn't just answered through traditional communications. They're answered through how we deal with HR and talk to our people across the country, across the world, in real time, in different cultural contexts, and arming them. How we talk to our customer experience team, right? If you're in CX and you're a frontline retailer, you're a product company, and your call center and your email people don't know actually how to respond to the crisis in real time, it doesn't matter what you're doing on network television or in print. Your social team, thankfully, in many brands, social is under comms, and that's really an organic connection. One thing we see a lot, though, is that influencer exists outside of comms in some situations, or there's a kind of artificial split between paid influencer and organic influencer. That puts you in a situation that when your brand is in crisis, you know what the worst thing is to make the crisis get bigger? One of the influencers that works for your brand turning on your brand online because we didn't get to them first. Give them the information, arm them up, so when bots are going after their account for sticking with your brand, they and their management are actually armed and know what to do. We talk about comms today as a decathlon. You've got to be good at internal and HR comms and board comms and working with CX and working with HR and working with social and working with influencer, and you've got to be able to do it pretty much simultaneously, which means you have to have those systems in place in advance. The other big shift that I think has really changed for crisis is for many, many years, when I was growing up in crisis, we were in the world of less is more. How do we get the fewest number of words in the story? Don't put the quote in the CEO's name because it's bad, it's negative news. Let's not engage the core rules of crisis. We're now in a world where, unfortunately or fortunately, more is more. We are in an attention economy. And if you want to push back on a narrative, if you think one quote in one story in the AP or putting your guy on closing bell is going to arrest the narrative, you're wrong. And I think we're in a world where you've got to be speaking across all of your communities. You need the immediate video that looks real and organic on social from the CEO. You need to be hitting your Reddit communities that you're managing. You need to be talking to your best advocates, your frontline workers, so they're prepared and know how to respond. We're in a world where volume is what's driving response and engagement. Think about the Instagram algorithm. The algorithm rewards those who post organically the most. They don't reward followers anymore. It's the people who are posting the most engaged content. We're in a world where you have to be hitting the rule of 7. It takes 7 times to see something before the info resonates. I can't tell you how many times we sit down with a client in crisis and they say, but we made a statement. It's on our website. It's on our blog. We addressed it. The customer is still streaming into the store angry about the thing that they're still seeing in a Reddit group. And that is where we're living today. So measure, monitor, manage, move from a marathon to a decathlon, and remember, we are now in a world of more is more. I'm so grateful to Dan for our partnership. He's going to close us out with final thoughts. He has made us smarter and better as a team, and grateful to be here, and grateful to the Muckrack folks. I will turn the golden button back over
that's it. It's the last slide.
to you.
We're done. We're done. I promise.
Right.
This is it. This is the thank you slide. 30 seconds. Everything that we talked about today, because we talked about different things, right? We talked about the Cracker Barrel mechanics. We talked about the embedded actors and all these different, narrative intelligence with a spin of manipulative and malicious. The missed positives, we talked about that. None of it is going away. None of it is going to go down. As a matter of fact, if you think about it, AI is kind of making it easier and cheaper and in a way more accessible for everybody. So the way that we look at it together is that in the next couple of years ahead of us, which are going to be interesting and challenging and rewarding, hopefully, the brands that will win are not going to be the brands that necessarily respond the fastest. They're going to be the brands that respond with clarity, crystal clarity. That's what you should be looking at. Think about the little JARVIS in your earpiece before you do something about that. And that's it. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time. Meltwater, thank you for giving us this opportunity. This has been unbelievable. And last but not least, Jonathan and the entire team from Orchestra, thank you for being a great partner.
Thanks for having us.
Enjoy the summit.
Thank you all. Thanks, everybody.